Hi, I'm Sally Boyd, your host for Activate Your Life Through Astrology. My guest today is Adam Sommer. Adam Sommer is an astrologer who is dedicated to augmenting your experience of astrology through playful words, inspiring podcasts, and hopefully life-changing readings as well. He has been practicing professionally for nearly a decade, working with clients and students all over this beautiful world. Trained and certified by Maurice Fernandez, he has used the sturdy foundation of exploring many other branches of the astrology tree, such as Yoidish, evolutionary, archetypal, and traditional forms. But he likes to find himself sitting beneath the tree, not solely hanging from its branches. By borrowing from many traditions and applying the techniques in his own life and countless clients he has worked with, he has stumbled on to what he calls cosmonosis, a direct and live relationship with the cosmos, up there and in here, which infinitely informs the participant with the most unique strand of wisdom. Hi, Adam.
Hello, Sally. Thanks for having me.
Oh, man, I'm so excited. I've been so excited about this whole interview. This is the one I've been like, ooh, no. I've been excited about every one of them. I don't want to, like, play favorites or anything, but I've talked to you the longest. I think I was, like, I've talked to you the most probably of everyone. You know, we've had some good little banter back and forth, and you've been traveling everywhere.
I've been traveling.
Yeah. You have been, like, on the road.
Yes.
I'm such a big fan of your podcast. That's how I kind of like got turned on to you, and I listened to them, and you know, I realized, you know, you just have such a different flavor. You're not like anybody else. And you bring it down to such a realistic level. So, you know, the first thing I want to ask you is, you know, where did that all come from? Where did you start out? Where were you born? What was your situation, and what got you here? I mean, you know, what got you to this point?
Well, if that's not the biggest question somebody could ask me, I don't know what is, Sally. Like, you're talking about a unique flavor, and then like going back to my childhood, like what created that flavor. I don't know where to start in answering that, but I can try. I can try to start with that. And so you said that I've been all over the place. I've been traveling. It's true. I was just in Maui. I was doing a retreat there with my dear friend Sherry, who, if anyone's ever listened to my Plants and Planets podcast, she's the one I kind of started that segment of my show with. And also for anyone that's watching this, my podcast is called Host to Heavens. And so you can find it anywhere that podcasts are found. That's also my website, Host to Heavens. And so, yeah, I was in Maui for a couple of weeks. We ran this retreat. We saw that eclipse that happened, the lunar eclipse, the ones that I think the media was. Yeah, you saw it. You're in Texas, right?
Yeah.
So everyone in North America, South America, some of Europe saw it. And so, yeah, the whole retreat led to that. And now I'm back in Colorado, but I'm kind of on a weird adventure at the moment. And, yeah, it feels good. In a way, it feels like I'm paying attention and riding the breeze of the Jupiter and Sag that's happening for all of us in the sky. Yeah.
So are you just are you still deciding where you're going to land? Or have
Landing is not a question at the moment. No, it's an adventure at the moment.
An adventure.
Yeah.
This is Sag.
Yeah, and for me, like, an adventure is about responding to what happens when you put yourself out there, right? And so, like, when I went to Maui, like, that was the first step of the adventure for me. I was open to staying in Maui, right? I was like, well, maybe I'll just stay here. Like, if I love it, and I do love it. It's an amazing place. It was the first time I ever went. But I wasn't meant to stay, right? It's just responding. And so I'm back in Colorado, and the only thing I have to do is be at this conference in May I mean, aside from doing the podcast and giving readings and stuff like that, but the only thing I'm committed to is this conference that's in Maine in May. And then, and we'll see. It's an adventure, Like, this is the whole idea of an adventure is I've cast myself to the wind and I'm just trying to, respond and fly. True.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Have you always been a traveler?
Yes. Yeah, and the reason I guess I brought that up is because my parents were that way. Like, I moved around a lot when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so that can be seen as a blessing or a curse. I can see both, but like for the most part, especially when I'm in chapters of my life like this, it's more of a blessing because I'm really good at doing it. I'm very adaptable. And so I actually really like being on adventures. I think a lot of magic, I think synchronicity is more common when you are on an adventure than when, you're paying rent or your mortgage month to month. At least that's my own experience in life. And so it feels good to be on one again because it is my default mode of being, actually, is to kind of be a gypsy.
Oh my gosh. I just interviewed yesterday my friend Denise, who also says the same exact thing. She's absolutely in that same place, and she uses that same gypsy mentality. You must have a very similar chart.
Yeah, a little Sag in our chart, maybe.
Yes, she does.
There you go.
Yes, she does.
That'll create it. A lot of Sagittarius in a person.
Yes, she does. Yes, she does. Got to have that freedom.
Yeah.
No kidding. So, and she was raised in a family that moved a lot too. And of course, I have a lot of Sages in my family, and my friends I have a lot of Sag people, and Jupiter's in Sag. So that's got to be like pumping you up to move.
Yeah. Yeah. I have it natally as well. I'm an 83 baby, so we have it. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. So tell me a little bit about when you knew that you were not, of course we know you're going to travel. When a Sag baby's born, we know they're not going to be tampered down. They're not going to sit still. They're going to be expansive. They're going to go. But when did you know you were going to be on this, let's say for lack of a better word, this kind of healing path? Because you've done some before you got into astrology, or before that was your main focus, which is it is now, you've done some other things.
Yeah. I was really interested from, I guess, a relatively early age, high school, in Eastern traditions. So like I started reading the Tao Te Ching, for example, when I was probably 16 years old. And like there was a band where I grew up that often would like use lyrics and such from like Joseph Campbell and Rumi and whatnot. And I was like, what are these sound bites? What are these lyrics? You know what I mean? And it was this band that I really loved. Wookiefoot is the name of this band. And I mean, that band had a lot of influence on me when I was in high school because like I loved them so much. And they were, in a way, pumping this message that was like ultimately about love and positivity, but doing it in like a mythic context. And so, having Kerouac quotes and Rumi and Joseph Campbell and stuff like that, like got into my mind like really young. And then, once I went to college, I kind of have always had like an intellectual disposition, I suppose. And so when I was in college, I studied creative writing and philosophy. And so that brings you all over the world, like trying to, find the truth through different strains of wisdom, I suppose. And I mean, in my early 20s, it was yoga and qigong and meditation and plant medicine and the combo that was like a huge, wonderful combo for so many people in the 60s and the 70s. And it's come back full force in the 21st century with different plants. And what I mean by that, like the plants that are new in comparison to what I think a lot of people experienced in the 60s is like ayahuasca and wachuma and iboga and all of these different deeper traditions in relationships to plants that were, well, it's just an evolution in my mind of a remembering, because we Westerners, we lost that contact a long, long time ago, perhaps in Eleusis in Greece, But many other cultures never lost their contact with sacrament or with prayer or with praise or with ceremony or with initiation. And so I've always been really interested in initiation and in prayer, and, you know, like, what are the Native Americans up to when they go into the teepee and eat peyote and pray all night? Like, all of that has always been really interesting to me. And a lot of my early 20s was that. Like, I was, you know, doing a lot of sweat lodges and doing a lot of plant medicine, and to understand what the hell is going on, because that's, in my experience in life, the only possibility, in if you're deeply, you know, like a suburban kid, like ingrained with this way of living, of breaking out of it. Like, it's very hard to break out of that way of thinking and living unless you have a plant ally to help you out of it, you know. And that's just my own bias. It's not me promoting plants or drugs or anything like that. Like, it's just my own experience, and it seems to be a very positive experience for many, to, in a way, like, rewire your brain, but your being, and then retether to spirit, because that's really the most important thing, is how do you get back into alignment with the truth of what you are, and your spirit, your love, your light. And that's exactly what I think these ceremonies do. And it's also exactly what I think astrology does at the heart. Like, astrology is the study of time and light. That's what it is. Like, you're studying the way light changes in the sky, or our experience of light. I mean, just take the moon, for example. I mean, that's a very clear understanding of light study, right? And, like, working with that, or from the winter solstice to the summer solstice, we're studying light and how it, you know, relates to our experience of time. And when aligned, like when you have such celestial navigation available to you, and you also have a relationship to theurgy and magic, and you have relationships to plants or prayer or mantra or any kind of a practice, you have the perfect combination. So it's not just astrology, and it's not just ceremony. It's actually both.
That's right.
And that combination is where spagyrics come from, or like really true hermeticism or magic, how it's practiced. Like, you need to know all of it to be able to have, I think, that understanding. And again, that's my bias, but that's where I find myself at this juncture of my journey, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, all right. So tell me, where were you in your 20s? What was your place? What was your place? Where was your headspace? You know, what was your, were you trying to, were you in an uncomfortable plot time? You know, when you started really this journey, were you trying to, you said you were trying to get out of suburbia. And, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
There's a lot of, I mean, a lot of people can relate to this. I mean, maybe we're not going to have a lot of kids that are listening to this that are trying to get out of suburbia, but I'm guaranteeing you that there are a lot of parents that have kids that are trying to get out of their suburbia.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do.
So this is where we're, you know, this whole thing is about making, this whole summit is about, you know, activating, you know, your life through astrology and or healing and or whatever medicine, natural medicine, or, you know, whatever we can do, and trying to create, you know, getting out of fear and chaos, and trying to create some ease and some balance, and knowing that, you know, the energy is working for us if we stop resisting it, right? So that's what we want to, that's what we kind of want to speak into. And so you can talk about this, because I think that really and truly, you know, like most of the kids that I know right now are so much further ahead. You know, like I was born in 1961, so I graduated in 1979.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I meet kids that are like, you know, they're graduating and they are so much further ahead than I was. You know, it's amazing. But I know that there's some, you know, I don't really buy that, oh, this generation is, you know, they're going down, you know, anytime I hear that, I'm like, these kids have it. You know, they're really, they've got it, you know. I really do believe that. But I'm sure that there are places and people that are they're struggling with their kids. So can you speak into that a little bit?
About the generations, or about people struggling with their kids, or about getting out of suburbia? Which part? You asked a lot of questions.
Anything you want. I know I asked compound questions. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah, just, go with it. Roll with it. Anything you want to talk about.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple. I want to invite two people into this answer. One of them is Carl Jung, and the other is Terence McKenna. And so there's a concept that Jung talked a lot about, which is individuation. And my understanding of individuation is basically that long and windy road that leads to self-discovery. And the only way to get to that location, if it even is a location, it might just be in the stride along that weird and windy road. But the only way you get there is by questioning what's around you. And so we invite Terence in, and he has this quote that's become kind of famous in subcultures that love him and worship him, which is, culture is not your friend. Culture is not your friend. And of course, culture has an incredible, but it also creates insanity, and it creates boundaries, and it creates flags, and it creates war, and it creates a lot of things. But like primarily as far as, say, our own journey of awakening and understanding, say, that through that individuated road, who we are, is to question everything that culture tells us. Question everything that this culture tells us. And so you're in Texas, I'm in Colorado, it's the 21st century, we're in America, and we're at, in a way, the crest of a wave that we can call Western civilization that worships in the church of progress. Like, there's this concept that is wired within our way of thinking about life that relates to that concept of progress. If it didn't, people wouldn't wait outside for Star Wars movies or the novelty of a new iPhone. People wouldn't do that. But because we worship at the Church of Progress, like, we have this issue of being obsessed with novelty and the next thing. And also, you see it in astrology where people are obsessed with or like their future. Their future being told for them. And that's something I've never been very interested in. When you study most cultures that are rich in self-practice for awakening, whether it's Buddhism or Hinduism or Taoism, like, you look to the Orient for these answers, none of them are talking about the future as a place to discover yourself. Every single one of them is talking about the present moment is where that happens, right? And so if you're in the present moment, culture actually doesn't really exist in the present moment. There's just space. There's just void. There's just potential in the present moment. And so culture is just an operating system. Like, for a Mac, you have OS Mojave at the moment, or like with Windows, you have 10. I don't know what number it is at the moment, but you have these different operating systems to function and execute tasks, right? Like, that's the whole function of an operating system. But the same is true with culture. You need functional jobs and systems in place to allow, say, when you're in a major city, 1 million people to cohabitate without chaos ensuing. But the way, say, Dallas, where you're from, or Denver, where I'm from, functions is very different than the way Kyoto functions, or Beijing functions, or the way Stockholm functions, right? Like, they're all different operating systems. And so what Terence is talking about is that culture is not your friend. If you have that as a premise on your long journey on the weird road to individuation, astrology is going to show up, right? It's going to show up eventually because it's everywhere. Like, every culture had their own astrology. And so if you are objective in your inquiries about truth and you're trying to understand, like, there's going to be a moment where you discover astrology for real. And you're like, oh my God, like, not only is this an ancient psychology, this is a way of understanding psyche. This is a way of understanding how consciousness actually organizes itself. And for me, it's a long answer, but like, that premise was in me since my early 20s, right? So I've been on this long and windy road of individuation ever since my early 20s, listening to people like Carl Jung and Nietzsche and spiritual teachers as well, like Sunro Suzuki or Chogyam Rinpoche. Like, I listen to people. I'm interested in where I can find truth or technique that brings me closer and closer and closer to my own awakening. And then when astrology came, 3, 24 years old, and I have Richard Tarnas to thank for that, who wrote Cosmos and Psyche, and he's also been on my podcast this summer, which was like a huge milestone for me to be able to talk to him, because he's the reason I even got into astrology. By writing that book, he changed my life. And that's the beginning of it. I was 24. I read Cosmos and Psyche, and then I started asking more and more questions about astrology. And because of that, I started meeting astrologers. I moved out to Portland, and I met all these astrologers out there. And then I began trading with them, because I was doing Qigong, or medical Qigong at the time. So I was doing these trades with astrologers out west. And I became kind of in love with it. I was like, there's so much to this. There's so much richness to it. And then in 2009, I don't know how old I was then. I think I was 25. I started the podcast because there wasn't one. There wasn't really an astrology podcast. People didn't even know what podcasts were hardly in 2009.
Yeah. No.
I did, because I'd been listening to them since their inception, which was in 2004. 2004 is when podcasts were invented. And I'd been listening to them ever since then. But in 2009, people really hadn't caught up to it. You know, people are slow to mass adopt to certain ideas, like cryptocurrency, for example. But so I started the podcast, and people were listening to it immediately. That was 10 years ago. So like, I just, when I knew that people were listening, I'm like, okay, I'm going to focus on it. I'm going to make this podcast better and better every single time I do it. And so after 10 years, like now, people listen. Like a lot of people listen to my podcast, and it's crazy. It's a weird experience, but a beautiful one.
It's really good. It's really good. And everyone is so different. I mean, really and truly, everyone is so different. And your guests are really good. And you're really real on, you have great subjects, you have great experts, and you're really, you got the right chemical going on. You really do. You just have chemistry. You got good mojo, man.
Thank you, Sally. Flavor mojo. I'm taking it. I'm going to take it where I can get it.
You do.
Yeah.
You do. I love that podcast. It's like, I listen to about 3, and you are one of them. I listen to it. I'm addicted.
Well, I appreciate that.
It's kind of crazy. I'm going to make sure that my laptop is plugged in. My battery is looking kind of weird for some reason.
Okay.
Okay, so I want to, there it is. Probably why. Yeah, there we go. This is great. I'm having so much fun. Okay, so one thing that just kind of, I remember that we were talking about was, or that I remember listening to not too long ago, probably when I made this call to ask you to be on the show, was you were doing a podcast, and it was on astrocartography. I can't speak.
That's it.
Yes. Astrolocation. We'll say that. I can never say that. I'm tongue-tied. Can you speak into how that is working for you and how it has worked in the past? Because I have so many clients right now that are making moves, trying to buy property, thinking about buying property, moving. Literally, there's so many baby boomers that are retiring, thinking about moving to different parts of the world. I myself would love to move to a different place, So I want to know, how long have you really been, using that, and has it rung true for you?
So astrocartography, or locational astrology, is what you're asking about. And I've known about it since the beginning of my studies of astrology, and so I've always been aware of it. And then I added it to my site as an option to give readings to people. Probably
you
5.
Do this, yes.
Yeah, I do it.
Because someone asked me specifically if you were going to speak on this subject.
Okay.
Someone is a huge fan of yours.
Okay.
One of the other experts asked me.
Okay. Well,
asked me if you were going to speak on this, and so I wanted to take this opportunity to kind of maybe.
I do it. Anonymous fan. I do it, and it's a really fascinating study, because in my mind, like, what it does is actually strengthen what's called the Goklan sectors. And so there was a study that this French couple did. I think it was in the 50s, could have been the 60s. It was a statistical analysis of angular planets, right? It was trying to make a case for astrology with stats. And one of them that has been popularized, you can even Google it and it will show up on Wikipedia, the Mars effect, is when Mars is applying to the ascendant or applying to the midheaven, really, in my opinion, any of the angles. It's within 5 degrees, we'll say, of any of the angles, but especially if it's applying to them. And so the assumption is that, well, if a person has, say, Mars on their midheaven, and it's applying to it, that they're going to be competitive, they're going to be an athlete, they're going to be involved in Mars in life, right? And they discovered that. The Gokulans discovered that, like with Mars, like it's very, very highly probable that when someone has Mars in such a placement, they will be incredibly competitive. They will be, whether it's a professional athlete or Olympian, I mean, that's, a rare thing entirely. But like when people have Mars there, like that's the kind of drive that they have. Well, what about Mercury? What about Venus? What about any of the other planets that show up to be true? And through the work that they did, I mean, they kind of, in a way, opened this door for more research to be done. And astrocartography, which was popularized or refined, we'll say, as well, by Jim Lewis in the early 70s, takes that idea and then creates lines throughout the planet. And so, like, when you see a line, like, say, it's a longitude line, it's a midheaven line of Mars going through the eastern United States or something like that, anywhere along that line, if you cast your relocated chart, that is, if you were born there, you would see in that chart that Mars is conjunct the midheaven. And say you look somewhere else in the world, Venus is going horizontally and it's the ascendant line. And say it's going through the west, it's going through LA. You cast the relocated chart for Los Angeles and you're going to see that Venus is conjunct the ascendant. That is, if you were born there. And so that is what the lines are in astrocartography, and I think it's a fascinating thing because it creates this case for angular planets being incredibly important, because the entire premise of astrocartography is around angular planets. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It does?
So how has it, so how, I know you've used it in your own, because I've listened to the podcast, so yeah. I know you have used it in your own life. Yes, as to like decision.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you've used it in your own life. So how have you found it incredibly accurate?
Yes, it is. It's informing. Like, you can almost think of the places. Say, like for myself, I travel a lot. When I go to a place that has a planet there, like I was just in one in Maui, Neptune line. Like I have Neptune influencing the Hawaiian Islands for me, and it's exactly what it feels like. Why? Because it feels like the most incredible place I've ever been in my life. Every time it feels like the Fey realm, right? Like it doesn't feel real. And so there's this effect of never wanting to leave. Like I want to stay here forever. Like I'm almost drugged by the place. Yeah. That's the way it feels. And then when I lived there once, like the first time I ever visited, I went there with a one-way ticket, being like, I'm moving here, without ever going. And so I was initiated because of that. Like those islands have a spirit. They have an attitude. Every island is different. And the Big Island was the one that initiated me. And it was like, you can't just come here thinking that you're just going to, set up shop in this way. Like you need to get to know us a little bit. And so like it turned from paradise into a hellscape very quickly. Wow. It happened this past time because I learned from my lessons. I hope we all do. We learn from the lessons. So I went there and I had the exact same experience. Like paradise. I'm swimming with whales. They're winking at me. Like this is the most beautiful place I've ever been in my life. And then the opportunities that I had to stay, I had 2 of them to actually stay there. I just watched those opportunities. I watched it kind of unfold or maybe show its true face. And both of the options did so. And I'm like, wow, this is what patience is. This is what it means to pay attention to Saturn. This is what growing up maybe looks like. You know what I mean? So, but it's an answer to your question because I knew that I was on my Neptune line. And so with that in context, like I know that I'm dealing with a heavy dose of Neptune the whole time I'm ever in the Hawaiian Islands. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
So let me ask you. All right. So for instance, like so I have Mars on my ascendant, and Mars goes straight through where I was born, down through Dallas, right where I
Yep.
was born. Right, of course, right. So that's
Yep.
exactly, and it goes straight through every place that I've been. That is not necessarily that I've lived, and even in other parts of the world. It's just like not been good. Or across something's like I looked at it just myself. Not even I don't do any of that, but I've never had a reading with that, and I don't. That's not my deal.
It's okay.
But I'm just wondering how like when you're and I was looking at something else like Venus. Oh wow, it looks like Venus is going through Cancun, and I'm supposed to be living in Cancun, man.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's funny when you give a reading for this. Are you looking at what people want to get out of the next stage of their life, or are you looking at like if they want to retire, or if they're wanting to make money in the next stage, or if they want to have children in the next stage? You know what I mean? Or do you just look
Mm-hmm.
at the overall? No, this is going to be a big shit show.
Well, I mean, that's up to them. It's up to their inquiry. Like if they're planning to move, then like, before the reading, I'll have them list out the options of where they might want to move. So I can look at those places. I can pull up those relocated charts.
Okay.
If they want to go and retreat and escape the world for 6 months, it's like, well, that definitely influences the way that I'm going to be looking at those maps. If they want to go somewhere in the world where maybe it's the best place to meet someone, say romantically,
Okay.
right? Like, so you have to have that question first, because when you look at the world map
Sure.
and then you see lines crisscrossing it all over the place, like there's no way a human being can interpret all of that and tell you exactly how every single place is going to affect you. You need the question to refine where you're looking, and then you have to cast a relocated chart. You need to look at a person's transit. Like there's a lot of input as far as information to get clarity around the person's inquiry.
So this is fascinating. So everybody needs to listen. If y'all are making a big move, you need to call him for one of these readings.
Yeah, I can help.
Tell us. Yeah, definitely. Tell us about your. I've been looking at your apprentice. I know you have an apprentice program and you have a school and all of that stuff. Tell us about that.
Well, I don't know if it's a school, but yeah, I did this apprenticeship program. Yeah, I've been doing it for 7, 8 years. It was usually one-on-one. Over the past couple of years, we did it in groups. And what I did last year was I recorded all of the classes. So there's 24 classes in total. And I'm now slow releasing them for my patrons. So if you go to patreon.com/Adam Sommer. Yeah, Patreon's a way for people to support you. Like if you're doing a podcast or if you're writing or whatever you're creating, it's a way for people to support you. And then you incentivize it at different pledges. And so with 25 and up, they get the slow release of these apprenticeship recordings every single month. What it is my attempt of giving a transmission of exactly how I use astrology, not just in a counseling context, because that's, the majority of how I use it, but also how to establish a very personal, and you said the word when you introduced me, that's just personal, but to have cosmonosis related to it. And so what that essentially is magic. Like by knowing astrology and by having a spiritual practice and knowing how to live with the two of them side by side or even intertwined, it's infinite in its supply of aha moments or synchronicity or whatever needs to happen to continually awaken you and remind you that this world is what you make it. But also there's these symbols, there's these lights, there's this time that we're working with that is the structure of reality, and it can be manipulated. That's the great news about our lives, is that we actually have a will, and we do have the capacity of exercising it. Fate's only a part of this whole structure of reality. Like we actually can manipulate it through ritual, through prayer, through praise, through working with crystals, by getting astrology readings, by like making huge changes in your life, by having better friends. You know, like you can change your world in a breath.
Right. We have free will.
Yeah.
We have free will. There's a big plan for sure.
Yes.
You know, we have destiny, but we have free will. I believe that for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So let me ask you a couple more questions. Okay, so I want to address spiritual awakening right now, because you're going to be my first interview, and I can tell you that I had so many clients that are going through spiritual awakenings, and I know you have too.
Oh, I don't know if I've done that yet. Maybe I have. Maybe not.
You haven't had any clients that feel like they're going through?
Clients who feel like it's happening to. Sure.
You don't feel like you've had a spiritual awakening?
I mean, sure. We'll say yes.
Yeah. Of course, we're constantly going through it.
Yeah.
I mean, we're always awakening to a higher level, I believe. But I think that the whole, there's something going on, definitely. What planets and what do you think's in place right now? Do you think it's the Saturn, Pluto, and Capricorn? Do you think it's Neptune and Pisces? Do you think it's this? Do you think or do you just, of course it's all of it, but what do you think's the big player out there right now?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go with your, of course, it's all of it, because I think awakening can happen through any of the planets. I mean, all of them are so amazing. They exist in the God realm, the astral realm, however you want to articulate that. But awakening can happen through any of them, and it really depends on understanding a person's chart. Like, what is a person ruled by? What is their North Node or Rahu ruled by? Because if, say, you have a Cancer North Node, and your ascendant's also in Cancer, then the moon is likely going to relate to your awakening. Whereas if you're a Capricorn rising person and you have the North Node in Capricorn, it's Saturn that is going to relate to your awakening in a very specific way. So for myself, personally, it's Mercury that relates to awakening because it rules everything in my chart pretty much. I really do think that astrologically... What's that?
That's why you're such a brainiac.
Don't call me a brainiac.
A spiritual brainiac. You're a spiritual brainiac. You are.
I'll take it. I'll take it where I can get it. And so, yeah, Mercury for me is a huge part of that because I sense it through language. I sense it through writing. I sense it through music, especially singer-songwriters. All the mercurial arts are what actually do that for me, and then my participation in it, that is me speaking and me playing music and me writing, does that for me. And so the closest that I get to God every single day is always with my mouth. It's with my mouth. Like, that's how it works. Whereas if someone's ruled by the moon and all that way, and Venus, like, it's going to happen in a different context. And so you asked about, is it Pluto, Saturn in their Capricorn formation? Is it Jupiter square Neptune? That's relative. It depends on what's happening in a person's chart. It depends on how integrated people are with like those story arcs, but like they're very different story arcs. Like the Pluto Saturn story is a dark story. That's where we feel the world is falling apart. That's where we look at a forest and all we see is beetle kill in the aftermath of fires. That's where we look at this world in the present and we're like, what in the fuck is happening? That's Pluto Saturn, right? Like, it's a fear that first comes when you think about it. It's not just fear, but that's what comes when you think about it. With Jupiter and Neptune, it's different. With Jupiter and Neptune, it's the silver lining of the entire zeitgeist at the moment. Jupiter and Neptune make you feel like anything is possible. It's like, well, maybe if I just buy a Sprinter van and a hot air balloon and I go on an adventure, everything's going to make sense and I'm going to completely align myself with the angels. Maybe if I smoke DMT in that hot air balloon, I'm going to be enlightened by the time I get back to the earth. You know what I mean? Like, it's a whole different story arc, but that has its shadow. And so there's both to everything. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally. Totally, of course. So I was thinking about my when you were saying that, I was thinking about I'm about to come across my second Saturn return just
Okay.
after. Yeah, well, it'll be on February. It'll be in February next year, right after.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I know, right? So I'm not
Yeah,
going
it's
to look at
big.
it like that really dark. I'm not going to look at it like right after January happens and all that. I'm going to be fine.
Yeah, you'll be
But
fine.
I'm gonna be fine. I'm gonna be fine. It's gonna be great. But anyway, I was just thinking when you were saying that Saturn Capricorn, like my first Saturn return was just so crazy, and I didn't know you were a musician.
I play
And
music.
I was a musician.
You
I'm a
are?
singer. So yeah.
Oh.
And my first Saturn return, I had a record deal with
Oh my goodness.
Capitol Records. Yeah. And so my
Wow. In
first
Nashville?
return, no, you would think. No, I was doing jazz and R&B and yeah. But anyway, I had a record deal and I had to release, and I was actually on the Billboard charts, and then like I had this record deal and I was jamming, and I was like, in Variety magazine and
Whoa.
yeah, really, honestly, like Luke and Laura on General Hospital, You're Too Young for That. I was doing my song. One of my releases was their love song,
Wow.
and they played just enough not to have to pay me royalties. And anyway, so that all happened, and that was like at 28, and by 29, boom, record deal was gone. I had no deal. I was totally back to doing theater and total different life, and then by the time I was 30, I was back home, and it was, a completely different thing. So I was just like, yeah. So this whole process of talking to all these wonderful astrologers, and you being my last interview, but being my first interview to be on the summit to be aired.
The Alpha and Omega.
I've just been like the denouement, just like the cherry on the top. So I just want to say thank you so much. And would you tell everyone a little bit about the gift that you're giving?
It was the Saturn Cycles class, correct?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
We ended up with Saturn.
Yeah, you got to remind me of that, but that's what it was. And yeah, so I taught it right before the end of the year. That's the end of 2018. And yeah, I just thought it was very interesting that the Saturn cycle began pretty much on the first day of 2019. It was technically the second day of 2019. But I'm really into studying synodic cycles, because if you want to work with changing your life or manifesting something into your world, you want to know how to work with synodic cycles, whether it's the Saturn one or it is Mercury, Venus, Mars. You want to know how to track these cycles and see them in the sky and track them in the chart. It's really important. And with Saturn, 2019 started with the beginning of the Saturn cycle, and it's going to peak in the summertime, and then it's going to close out at the end of 2019. And so the whole class is about that, but it's also some overall philosophy about Saturn and how to get close with Saturn and to kind of heal your relationship to him, because most people have a really unfortunate relationship to the idea of Saturn. And what that tells me, like an instant translation in my mind, when people say fuck Saturn, they're also saying fuck reality. Screw life. I'm not into working with this third dimension. And that's what he governs. Saturn governs the third dimension. And that's the world that we are moving through when our eyes are open. And so it's really important to know how it works. And so Saturn is actually one of the greatest things to pay attention to out of the pantheon that we work with as astrologers. So the class is about that. And I give chart examples, and then I give a sample reading at the end of the class too, to kind of convey the way that it functions in people's worlds, or a single person's life in that case.
That is so cool. That's very generous of you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. You are one of the coolest guys. I can't believe I scored you on this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome, Sally. Thanks for having me. It's nice and warm by the fire. I always like talking about this stuff, so it's my pleasure.
Yeah, you're cool. Cool. Thank you so much, Adam. I just, I'm in such admiration. I'm such a big fan, and, forever yours.
It's a Texas saying, I think.
No, bless your heart is a Texas thing.
Oh, yeah, bless your heart. Well, thank you so much for having me. I wish you the best with your summit. I hope it's really successful.
Thank you. I feel like it will be.
Wonderful.
Thanks very much. And you know what? I can't wait to hear what goes on with you next. I can't wait to hear about your next adventure. I know it's going to be really cool, whatever it is.
More storytelling is the only thing I can say. More stories. Yeah.
More stories. Interesting stories.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks again, man.
You're welcome, Sally. Have a beautiful night.
Oh, you too.